And hey, here we are. How are you, everybody? Dr. Mike, this MTFU Success Podcast on a Friday night. Of course, I had this scheduled a couple of days ago, and because of my technological shenanigans and tomfoolery, we had to reschedule it for right now. But my guest and friend Jeffrey Kelley was all good for it. He said, "Hey, don't worry about it." He's a busy guy. He's getting a lot of things done. And he's here with us anyhow. And I've known Jeff through his doings on Facebook and on the internet for a few years now, and he's an interesting guy. He does things, he puts himself out there, he takes risks. I'm very curious tonight because I don't know a lot about what he does. So, I like to find out and dig in, and I'm sure you do too. But he produces documentaries and movies, and he's also been a bodybuilder. He's competed in bodybuilding when people would tell him on the job that you'll never do it. Who hasn't heard that before? You know what, Jeff? I call myself the best mediocre bodybuilder in the world. So I kind of self-efface and embrace people at the same time.
Well, that's perfectly all right. And someday I'm going to get that pizza out of that guy.
Oh, yeah. I hope that you will. I believe you will. He'll come to you for help. That's how it works. But Jeff does a lot of cool stuff, and he's put his stuff out there. He's won some cinematography awards, film awards, and he's working hard. He's rising now, and I thought we'd have him on here. He has a film coming out called The Pugilist, and I even posted a documentary he did on his bodybuilding journey, a show that he went on, and I think I put that on MTFU tonight. So you may want to check that out. It's only 12 minutes, but it's very impactful, and it delivers a great message, and that's really what we want. But Jeff, how are you, man? Thank you. You're up in Canada.
Yes. And if you I'm up in New Brunswick, so if you were in Boston, you hit it north for about 8 hours, you'd be in my front door.
Okay.
It's not too far away from a major hub, and Boston's an amazing city, and from there you can pretty much get anywhere. And haven't really been across the border this past year because it's been a little bit coming back really be more the problem because you have to provide extra time because you have to come back in quarantine now. So that prevents from going anywhere. But where this is interesting is when I actually wrote The Pugilist, the goal with it was to try to shoot it in Boston.
Oh.
That was originally what the funding was going to be. The idea behind it being Boston, great sports town. It's got a rich history of boxing, and it's got some great academic facilities there. So in the movie itself, where we have a boxer who's on the decline, suffering from CTE, his wife is an academic whose career is going up as she receives tenure. And so that was something that could fit into that sort of a city, that sort of a setting. So it was always something that we had wanted to do. Now, financially, the funding to that level didn't come through. And of course, when you go into different areas, you have to have local producers as well, so you have to access tax credits and funding and that. So we wound up filming it here in St. John, which actually has, interesting enough, a history of being used as a double for Boston in many movies. We've been shot, films that come here and shot that were meant to be in Boston, Chicago, and New York quite a bit. The reason behind that was 100 years ago, roughly, the city mostly burnt to the ground, and it was construction crews and architects from Boston, New York, and Chicago that came here, helped to rebuild the city. So a lot of our city streets bear a striking resemblance to some areas in these other communities.
That's cool. What we're going to talk about that. I just watched The Pugilist. Very good movie. It's got some messages I want you to find and talk about. But before we do that, let's talk about, I want to know who you were, getting down to the nitty gritty, how you started, who you were growing up, who you hung around with, what they meant to you, your family, what planted the seeds of what drives you today. Because again, you're doing things, you're operating at a high and very difficult level where the coefficient of failure is almost assured. And so you got to, usually guys like you, I have found that there's got to be something burning, some type of dagger that was maybe, stuck in you somewhere that's driving you. So what was it like growing up in Canada when you were?
The winters were cold and snowy, but the summers were quite nice. To be in Canada, I'm an odd duck in that I've never really taken the winter sports as much. I always gravitate toward summer sports or indoor sports in the winter. But I suppose to get an idea as to where my personality might come from, when I was about, weight yay big, just a wee fella, my mother, she had three of us. And I was right in the middle. I was the middle child. So without getting too deep in the idea of middle child syndrome, anyone that's really interested that knows that, then think of in terms of being one of Irish triplets. We've all heard the term Irish twins, born close together. Well, there were three of us, boom, boom, boom. So when Mom had to take us places, down to the grocery store or whatnot, and walk to the old North End, I used to like to run away. Not because, hey, things are bad, just there's something out there to see, I've got to go see it. So she decided to get a harness with a leash. So, so she's walking along, she's got my little brother in the stroller, and my sister's hanging off it, and she's trying to pull me. Then she's walking along one day, and she noticed there wasn't any resistance. This is the first day I'm in the thing. It was the first and only day. So she pulled it over and looked at it, and I'm gone. I somehow gotten loose, and I was missing. And over the years, I think I probably put every gray hair on that sainted woman's head probably came from me, doing things like that as a child. And you get the appropriate discipline or scolding, but never anything that would kill the spirit. And I think that's important too. If I had something that I wanted to do, want to accomplish, that was always encouraged. When I went and I did these little escape escapades, there always was the proper punishment. So there was a good balance. And I think sometimes when we're young, we all have that desire to seek things, to try new things, to see what's in the next yard, to go over that fence. But somewhere along the way, a lot of us, I think that spirit gets killed perhaps by getting in trouble and maybe not having the appropriate punishment, or maybe getting away with something too many times as well. So as that went and time went on, my father got me into sports. He came home one day and said, "You're in T-ball." He came home one day and said, "You're signed up for minor basketball." So by doing those sorts of things, and of course I was into cycling, so there was always a bicycle around. So it was good to me that way. So that fit all that energy that wanted to escape into something else, which eventually translated over to the bodybuilding.
When did that happen? When did you become interested in bodybuilding?
Well, there was an interest in there for years. Probably when I first started noticing and paying attention to it was when movies like Commando and Predator were coming out, and you're seeing these big hulking men that look like the action figures that would be set aside in the basement that I played when I was young. And so you start to notice, and you look at their discipline, what they've done. And then I read Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, and going through all those photos and reading all the stories, you start to learn about more bodybuilders. And that's also when I discovered who Frank Zane was, who in my mind is the greatest of all time. There was something special about that man. And there was an interview I saw with him one time, in which he made a statement. Someone said, if you were in the gym so much, when did you have time to do this, to do that, to the other thing? He said, what you don't understand, what modern bodybuilders don't understand, we didn't do those things. We didn't have the time. It was all sacrifice for this goal. So you're hearing this type of rhetoric from these bodybuilders, and you're starting to admire them and learn about them. And that also translates into other things that I was doing. And
Jeff, would you say that, so at that halcyon time when you were young, you didn't just look at these guys as big guys, you looked a little more deeply into what they were about?
What it would take to get there. There was an old movie, and I think it's Kirk Douglas, but don't quote me on this. And he was like a bounty hunter or type of character, and he's chasing a renegade. So he's in his hotel room. I was probably 5 or 6 when I saw this movie, and it sat with me. So while he's watching the news report to see how we can track this man, his character is just doing push-ups over and over again, staying sharp, his mind staying disciplined, and of course paying attention. And it was something about that scene and that level of discipline too that always stuck with me, that you can accomplish multiple tasks, but you've got to stay focused.
Right.
There's something to be said about that sort of drive. So I really enjoyed that. And that was eventually, as I said, led into learning more about the bodybuilders. And the first show came about when I was told by some guys at work, it was a rain day. And,
but before you get to that, what was your first gym? Did you train at home or did you go to a club?
You know, I started at home real young, doing push-ups and sit-ups, chin-ups off the rafter in the basement. I can't remember a time when I wasn't at least doing some type of chin-up or push-up or something, even as a child. When we started to get into different sports, there's always a way to try to get fit and stronger and improve with everything else. So there's always something like that going on. When I got into junior high, I had the old cement York.
Oh yeah,
and all that. I worked with them, and it probably was when I was, I'm going to say the 11th grade or thereabouts. I started going up to the YMCA and lifting up there with these big monsters of men. And you know, you go in the first time, you see some of these guys that have been doing it at that point 20 or 30 years, and they're lifting, and they have a culture, and they have a system, and you're trying to figure out and navigate your way. It can be a little bit intimidating at first, but then something very wonderful happened that used to happen all the time with the culture of bodybuilding, at least in my experience, and it seems to have been set aside now, where it was a very collaborative yet competitive community. So if you went in to a place like the Y back in those days, there would always be someone that as soon as they saw you were serious, they would come over, they would help you, they would teach you how not to lift something in a way that you don't hurt yourself, or explain how a certain muscle works. So that all grew from there, and I really had no grand illusions at that point of ever competing. I was doing it partly because I enjoyed the exercise, I enjoyed the routine, and I enjoyed competing with myself. I liked getting stronger, I liked getting better. And then that leads us to where I was at work one day, and we didn't work in the rain. Well, the linemen didn't. I worked with the linemen at the power company. And so rain days, unless it was an emergency, because electricity and water don't really get along, of course, they would stay inside the shelter. And I'm, again, thumbing through Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, the old with the yellow cover. You know.
Oh, yeah.
And one of these guys comes over, and he just goes up one side, down the other. You could never look like that. You could never do it. You could never. So there was, I think, 6 or 7 weeks out from a competition. So we made a bet, and I was going to go and do it. And
this is your first show.
Yeah, so we got a pizza. All we had to do was come in the top 3 in any one division. And I wound up with 2 third place and 1 second place between the 3 areas I was in. So
that's damn good. And you know, I'm going to just interject. I did put up your short bodybuilding documentary, Rebuild, and for anybody watching, it's on MTFU, and maybe I'll put it on my regular page too. It's short, but it's very good, impactful. And let me tell you, for your first show, I hate to say, it's like somebody telling me, hey, for 57, you look pretty good. I like to think I just look pretty good, and that's it. I don't like to qualify, but for your first show, you really put it together.
That wasn't my first show. That was my last show.
What was your last?
The first show was the one where I owed the pizza.
Okay, right.
It was my last show, which was after a 10-year absence, where I'd gone through clinical depression. I spent some time living in my truck, and from there I moved into a storage locker for a little bit.
We'll get into that a little more deeply, because I know that's something that you had to surmount, and people learn from that, like to hear that. But well, let me just ask you, the guy on the job, after you did well in the show, what was his attitude? Not that it matters to you, but did he change his tune? Or?
Oh, not really. He came in and told me he didn't owe me a pizza. He wasn't going to give it. It wasn't quite right. He had 1,000,001 excuses not to buy me the pizza. But had it gone the other way, he would have expected it. But that was the nature of this guy. He was one of these guys, we all know, that they want to argue, and they'd rather argue than be right. You know, and
Jeff, do you work hard these days to not have those types of people around you?
I try my very best to keep the negative people away. I wish them well. I don't want to see anything bad ever happen to anyone, but it drains you and it can exhaust you. And if you surround yourself with negativity, you're going to become negativity. If you surround yourself with positive people that are always looking for a way to improve and go further, and encourage others, you're going to improve and go forward further. You're going to encourage others. You're going to find more success. I just happen to believe that. And I believe that if I was still surrounding myself with the naysayers, I wouldn't have accomplished any of the things that we plan to talk about here today.
Well, let's just speak on that. You know, you've had them with bodybuilding, and I would imagine maybe even more so with film production and making films and things like that. I mean, see, most people, they think that there's something that's different about people who are maybe in the movies or on TV. There's a tendency. I've dealt with some Hollywood people in some of the things I've done, and there's a tendency for them to make people think that they're not of that world and it can't be had. Whereas I think you and I think that what one man has done, another man can do. But even still, you're working with these things that people can never fathom even attempting. So you must get, the verbal attacks or onslaughts or snide looks.
Yes, and usually at the worst possible times when you're trying to build your momentum. When you've achieved something, all of a sudden the same people that do all the snide looks and make the offhand remarks are now all of a sudden saying, "Oh, that was good. I believed in you."
But you're not. That's not your. Hi, Joe Leo here. You are right. I'm sure you're talking about Jeff being right, because I am just here for the ride. I'm a curious one tonight. But you don't do it for them. You would do it anyhow.
No, exactly. When it came time to do the pugilist, and the pugilist has an interesting history. It actually began as a short story, which was I'm
going to stop you one more time.
Yep.
And keep that in your hand. But you did go to college and you trained in some of this. So what made you, maybe there were people saying, "Hey, that's nuts. Pursue this. It's more of a sure thing," and you kind of went on a tangent. So what developed the interest in film production and acting in college?
Well, when I first started going for my post-secondary, I was interested actually in archaeology. And that was where I was going to begin my pursuit. And somewhere during that first year, I noticed that there was, in the English literature classes, there was a different type of debate, different type of discussions going on, dissecting the work, seeing why, look at the politics behind it and the time of the cultures. So I gravitated towards that. And now I'd always enjoyed writing. Even as a kid, I was writing all the time, writing. So as I started to discover more about writers like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, I started really liking the idea of becoming a storyteller. So as I was doing that, the opportunity to take some classes in film production as well had come up, and to do some studies of some films, the same way you would have compared to literature. So I ended up with a major in literature and a minor in film. I went on to do some serious study at the master's level in literature. My thesis, unfortunately, was never defended. It became a financial thing. I just ran out of money.
You had to do a thesis to graduate?
To finish my master's, I would have.
Oh, okay.
So I finished the undergraduate. The graduate would need the master's thesis. I was actually a year ahead of schedule on that, but I just couldn't raise the funds, so I went back to working full time. And during that time too, I also pursued an MBA, and I went class shy of that when I stopped working for other people. I stopped pursuing the MBA, and I achieved a professional designation in supply chain management. And these things served me well where I was. But when I made the choice to leave, I wanted to reset myself and go back to the things that I enjoyed. Now, I'd enjoyed literature and film more. I'd always want to be a storyteller. So it became an opportunity to pursue those things now. So although there's still value in what I've learned with the supply chain studies and the MBA studies, the more, I think, important part came with studying the film, the literature. But now I knew how to transition that into something more practical.
Jeff, I had Derek Wayne Johnson on as a guest, and a little young. I mean, you're younger than me. He's younger than you. As you get older, there's more people behind you. I will eventually be the oldest man in the world.
We're not aging, Mike. They're all just getting younger.
Derek, as you know, has produced a couple of documentaries, several on John Avildsen, the Oscar-winning director of, and also with Sylvester Stallone, 40 Years of Rocky, and he's really risen. He's doing some great things. But he told me, and I'm going to ask you, he got out of film school and he just started shooting off emails. He wasn't afraid to do it, and he got a response from the director, Avildsen, who was very famous. Was there someone similar to that who guided you or helped you or said, "Hey, you're on the right track, keep going"? Did you have that, or were you pretty much on your own?
Well, I had actually worked as a production assistant and a stand-in on films before, which gave me a little bit of knowledge. But when it came time to start putting mine out, I had some contacts I could rely on for things like the cinematography, the lighting, all the rest of it, the technical end of it, where I might have been lacking a little bit. But as far as knocking on doors and getting a hold of people, the ones that actually helped me the most, other than some of the local businesses that got behind the local boxing and martial arts community, Durham Octa Boxing Club, KV Boxing, those ones, Dolly Cat Martial Arts, these guys all got behind it. But beyond that, at a larger level, Everlast and Ringside were both very receptive to this idea. And they wanted to get involved with the pugilist, and they helped me out tremendously as far as doing things that helped get made with alleviating the financial burdens. But as far as anyone wanting to come right on and give a little bit of guidance, only if they would have the project, and I wasn't about to give it up, which, if I'm not mistaken, isn't too dissimilar from how Stallone was with Rocky. If I'm not mistaken, when he first went to the studios with Rocky, they wanted to get rid of him.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
And it was a similar situation. And had it been another story, I might very well say, yes, okay. But there was something about the pugilist that meant something to me.
Jeff, ironically, I was watching Stallone. I have it right here. Takes on Howard Stern, and Howard asked him about that story again. How the studio kept offering him more and more money, and he was broke. He had $100 in the bank, and it came down to $360,000, which adjusted for inflation is almost $2 million.
Yeah.
And even his agent was saying, "Take the money," but he was so down and out. He said, "What do I have to lose? I'm attached to this."
Yeah.
And you mentioned a rut that you were in, down and out. Would that at all coincide with difficult decisions you had to make as far as going forward?
I think it helps, because when you really hit rock bottom and you've got to pull yourself back up, you're not afraid to have to do it again. You've done it, you can do it. So my hesitation to hand the pugilist off, I think it has something to do with the fact that I had been so far down the ladder at one point. I wasn't in the cellar, I was underneath it. That it became one of these things that if I've got to crawl back up again, I can.
Jeff, when you were beneath the basement, so to speak, were you even taking care of yourself physically, or did you stop training, stop eating right, the whole thing?
Everything had stopped for a long time.
Like you couldn't get off the couch, that I bet people have been there,
Yeah, couldn't sleep. I was awake all night. Started watching a bunch of cartoons in the middle of the night, infomercials, things like that. Just very awake, and where it started to actually change for me there. And during the day, it was I became too well acquainted with beer, and the beer got lonely with whiskey. And those are dark paths to go down. And so one day I realized that all the infomercials, all the cartoons coming on at 3 a.m. I've seen. So I decided to take myself out and get a cup of coffee. So I got my coffee and I went down to the Timber Cases River, and I sat there and I'm watching the river go. And I started doing that every morning just before dawn. And I started to feel a little bit better all of a sudden. And then that's when the idea started to get to me that I'm up already. At 5:30, the closest gym to town opens. I should at least go and see if there's still something there. And so the first day I went in, I talked to the lady at the door, and I said, I'd like to come in, and I was perfectly willing to pay for membership, but they didn't start doing that till 9 a.m. But she let me come in and train anyway, so I went to a treadmill.
Do you remember how hard it was to do that?
Oh, it was very hard. What I had told myself, if I can get through the door, get to the treadmill, I'm going to run on it for 1 hour. If I make it 1 hour, now if I have to stop for a minute here and there as I'm going, that's fine. But I can make it 1 hour. I know I can come back the next day and start rebuilding.
Jeff, what happens to you if you don't get up and get that cup of coffee, sit at the bench and watch the water and decide to go to that door and ask that lady? What happens to you if you never do that?
I don't think I've ever done anything else.
Would you be here today right now?
No, not at all. There's no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't be here.
And were you alone at the time?
I was, but one of the first things that I went out to do, well, I had family in town and friends and that, but as far as interpersonal relationships, I was alone. The ex and I had broken up by this point. One day I'd come home and discover I didn't live there anymore, and that was that.
Wow.
But it's a story a lot of people can tell. Like, I'm not unique in that regard.
But did you have your dog at the time?
No, I got the dog after I ran on the treadmill.
Oh, no kidding.
I said to myself, and I had been talking to a couple of doctors as well throughout all of this. A psychologist, a psychiatrist, a nerve practitioner, and a therapist. Out of the three of them, the therapist was the most helpful. He was the only one that wasn't a doctor. But he was able to relate the best. The rest of them wanted to push on medications. I didn't want to go on medication because that wasn't the problem I was having. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it when that's the right call. But in my case, it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't. And we're too quick to go there right away in our society, I think. If you need it, they're a godsend for you. But I think we are over-medicated on a whole.
Oh, we can do hours on that, trust me.
You would know the subject better than me.
I'll tell you this, though. Everything has value. I think everything that exists has value. But at the same time, there are very few absolutes. And when I say that, an absolute, for instance, is, there's 21% oxygen in the atmosphere. That's not negotiable.
Yes.
But person to person, your solution was not out of a little, opaque orange medicine bottle. That wasn't for you.
No. And there was actually a therapist who said, his name was Brad DeLong. He's passed away now. He was an excellent man. And he had said, Jeff, you should have a dog. And up until that point, I was actually terrified of dogs.
Really?
When I was about 14, I had one of them bite me right in the Future Maker.
Right. Never heard it called that.
Yeah, and I don't want to get us in trouble streaming, but
no, you can say what you want here. I will tell you this though. I learned I used to be very profane, and I'm not anymore. A couple of reasons, but one of them is YouTube will take you off if they don't like if it's too much profanity, or I just try to stay really vanilla with that stuff. And to deliver a message, I think if you can't do it without a bunch of profanity, then the words don't have enough pop anyhow.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, sometimes we're all going to get a little excited, mind you, but
sure.
In different atmospheres, different locations might prompt you to go into different directions with how you might speak. But no, I agree with that sentiment.
I will say this, and I'm not going to give anything away. I was able to preview. Can I mention the dog?
Absolutely.
Oh, I previewed one of Jeff's movies coming out, and I can't disseminate, but it actually made me cry today. It's really, boy, what a powerful little clip you sent me, man. And I know I can't say much more. And even though I've just recently lost my dog of 20 years and whatnot, I don't know anybody. Listen, if you don't at least shed a little tear after watching this, you have no soul.
I'm very proud of that little film, and I wish I could say
it's really very not that it means anything that I'm impressed, because I don't do what you do, but I didn't expect that, man. That was great. I hope you can get that out there soon.
The general audience's impressions of work means more to me than those of the peers weighing you for awards, because you look for different things. When you're weighing
you look for what, for instance? Well, we got Tony Corby here, a really good member. Hi, Tony. How are you? If you just joined us, Jeff Kelley is a producer and actor, and he's also in sports world, bodybuilding, boxing, and he's got a really interesting story. And Tony's a cool guy. Tony appreciates depth, which is what you're giving us tonight. So please continue.
Well, I hope he enjoys it then. But this the short film that you're talking about, and we can drop the title. It's End of Leash. I wish I could say I was the writer and producer on that.
End of Leash. And if you were able to see the content for the people watching, that would even add more depth.
And what had happened with that, while we were shooting The Pugilist, a fellow was working on The Pugilist for me by the name of Robert Silker. And he was working as a script supervisor and a production assistant. He had come to me towards the end of our run and said he wanted to produce a short film. He had written one. He asked me if I'd look at the script. I looked at the script and I fell in love with it. And all he was looking for was a little feedback. And I gave him the feedback, and I said, I'm not the right guy to produce this for you because I'm too close to this. But you should talk to John Blizzard, who has a company called Steam Powered Productions, or Steam Powered Studios, I should say. And he's a gifted producer. He's a gifted ambassador, of which Well, I mean that if you go to a set, he's there. No matter who's on that set, no matter how many, no matter what's going on, you will always feel like the most important person on that set. They'll make 50 people feel that way at the same time, and that's a gift. So they got to talking, and as they were talking, John said to Robert that he would come on after he looked at the script and produce it, but that the only person he could see in that lead part was me. So I was preparing to launch a campaign to lobby for it anyway, because I'd fallen in love with the script. So we put that movie together at that point. And I don't really want to give away the big twist, but when we were having our first major production meeting, we all roomed together, the entire group, that was when I found out that this had happened to one of my childhood friends. And that made the experience a little more challenging, but a little more personal. And as much as I enjoy the stuff that I write and produce or direct, and much I want to pursue more of that, if projects like this come up too, I'm going to jump right on, help other people get them made, because this was a story worth telling.
Jeff, your friend who passed, and the poignancy of the video I watched today about the dog. When you're conveying messages as an actor, do you draw upon, and this is probably a very basic question, but for me, I don't know. Do you draw upon personal experiences that may relate and help you evoke emotion or response or energy for the camera? Is that method acting? Is that what that is?
Well, it's a step towards method acting. I try to do that. If you can't relate to a character, you can't do your script justice, and it might be time to step back and let someone else come in. And one of the tricks to do that, sometimes if it's not right there in the script, if you can create a backstory and figure out why this character got to that point, that helps. Where this differs from method acting is a method actor will become that character 24/7 until the whole time it's
right. Okay.
Tom Lee Jones is a great example of that. There's a story, and I don't know if it's true, but there's a story that when they were shooting Lonesome Dove, he slept in a tent and only ate what he could cook out over open flame the whole time because his character was a cowboy.
Wow.
And that's a step further than I think I would go. I like my band.
Do you get paid extra as an actor when you end up doing that?
No. If they really want you, they'll pay you extra, but it won't matter what you do. They'll pay you extra. They'll pay you more if you're Harrison Ford than they will if you're Jeff Kelley. That's just, because the reach is there. I have a joke I like to tell my filmmaker friends that I'm the poor man's Dennis Quaid, and if he ever turns something down, I'll do it for not that price.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, interesting little thing about Tommy Lee Jones. A lot of people don't know. He went to Harvard. I guess and his roommate was Al Gore, I believe.
Yes.
And he was involved. I think he was a lineman with in a Yale Harvard football game. One of the most famous football games where it ended up tied. And the headline was Harvard beats Yale like 20-20, and the only reason they said they beat them was they came back by, I don't know, some ridiculous amount of points in the last 60 seconds or something. I never knew. I just learned that recently. I thought that was kind of interesting.
By all accounts, he was quite an athlete, and I had heard just recently myself that Al Gore had been his roommate. I didn't know that, but I did know about the football.
Yeah. And since we're both bodybuilders from the bodybuilding world, another interesting thing, the producer and director of Pumping Iron, whom I've gotten to speak to a couple of times, I'm very happy about, George Butler. This was a long time ago, but he was the photographer for John Kerry when he was going through his early political career, I guess. But he was a photographer, so he's involved in other branches he wasn't just in bodybuilding, he came from other, endeavors. So.
Oh, that's really neat. It's a small world, and you start to see all these little connections. You sometimes never really know. I mean,
well, Jeff, actors though, I was thinking about this today, preparing to get you on here. Actors in general, a lot of times they're not really trained as actors. They came out of different professions, or is that true? More so than not, or?
I think there's a good healthy split, but I think a lot of the ones that are trained aren't formally trained. I think they learn it through community theaters and that sort of training. When we were shooting the Pugilist, I would say probably about half the people that were involved were actors that had experience either in film, stage, or some type of training. and the other half were not. And those were the ones that, for the most part, surprised you. There's a character there named Will. He was a training partner that quit in the second half of the movie. Well, he just wound up in the movie because one day we showed up at the Boston Club to shoot some scenes, and so they had to have somebody there to the club on set, third property, perfectly reasonable, and so he was the guy. And when we got there, the camera crew setting up, the light crew setting up, the DP is checking to see how we can make. We'll have a shot list and storyboard before we go do something, and I'll have several meetings with my DP, and I'll pass off to him at that point and say, make this room look like this shot we discussed, and I'll go on to the next thing. And so this gentleman here, Will, he got up to me and he says, "You're in the scene." Yeah, I said, "So you're moving the boxes?" "Oh, come on, boss, I'll warm you up." But he didn't ask me; he told me. And so, well, we had a camera rolling for test footage at the time, and the test footage, which was never meant to be anything else, actually became the first teaser trailer, and we released it. We released it that night. So I contacted him earlier that day, and I said, before we were on the script, we still had a lot of things to shoot at the training, and invited him on as cast at that point. So his role in the movie just came out of him being there at the right time, but it's one of the best performances in there.
Wow, that's a little serendipity for you there.
It was his first movie. He'd never done a movie before. So
Jeff, take us back to we can come back to this, but I just want to backtrack. So you got into the gym, you got back on the treadmill, you're out of shape, you're climbing back up. So take us from there and take us to how the pugilist became a reality, how you started working on that.
Well, as I was running the treadmill, every so many minutes I have to stop. I'd stop for 1 minute and I'd run for so many. And I made it through that first day. And then I made Rageman skip the ball. And that was important. And at this point, that's when I was preparing my first book, which was actually a book of poetry and critical essays. And a lot of these were actual things that I'd written before that I had collected. I was putting it out there. And I had done that. And it was probably the most successful one of my ventures, financially speaking. It got picked up by some school libraries throughout the Midwest because the essays were about Robert Frost. So that was a little bit of luck that they noticed that and put it in their libraries. And from this point on, I was debt-free, and I've never gone back into debt.
Wow.
That's a very wonderful. Now, I'm not saying I never will. It could happen tomorrow. But right now, I'm beholden to no one. That's a nice feeling.
That's a great feeling, isn't it?
Well, it really is. There's nothing better.
Jeff, I've written about this. Years ago, I crushed my leg. This was 30 years ago when I got out of school. And right out of school, I was homeless. Not that I didn't have a family, but I had to go visit different hospitals. I ended up $800,000 in debt when I wasn't even 30 years old. And looking back, I don't know how, I paid it back, and I climbed back, and but I remember what that feels like. I was so young, I didn't really understand how bad it was. So maybe if I had that maybe if that happened when I was older, I would have been more screwed. But it's not a place I want to revisit again,
I think you're right. I think when you get older, before you have a major crisis, it's probably more of a shock. But when you're younger and you're still full of beans, it's more of a challenge.
Exactly. In other words, you have that idealism, like, I will overcome anything.
There was a commencement address that Schwarzenegger gave a few years ago at USC, and I always found that very inspirational. And there's something in there he said, if I listened to the naysayers, I'd still be in the Alps Yielding.
He'd still be what?
I'd still be in the Alps Yielding.
Oh, was that his 6 rules of success?
Yeah, it's in that same speech.
Yeah, that's very, very good. Yeah.
And it's probably the most interesting speech he ever gave. It captivates you, and I like that what he said there. If you listen to the naysayers, he basically said you'll fail.
Jeff, I know I've got this on my end, but for you, you've already mentioned education, Arnold's Encyclopedia. Would you say you patterned not your life, but some of your efforts and your trust based upon what you learned from Arnold?
Well, I think it would be unfair to say it was solely Arnold. But if you look at Arnold, Frank Zane, Lou Ferrigno, the guys, all the ones that I was reading about and learning about, and you start to see how much work and dedication they put into things. I think they all had direct impact on it. Schwarzenegger is probably the most noteworthy or quotable because he had the largest social presence outside of bodybuilding. So people can relate to that easier. Whereas if you sit down and you say, well, you know, Frank Zane said this, or you sit down and you say, Mike Katz said that, then he might have said great things that are inspirational. But most people don't know who they are to the level that they know Schwarzenegger.
Jeff, why did you end up making a movie not about a bodybuilder, but about a boxer?
Well,
in other words, did you also have, you mentioned Ferrigno, Zane, Arnold, did you also gain energy or inspiration from any boxers coming up?
you know, that's a good question. And before I jump into that, just if I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that Franco Columbo was an amateur boxer before he was a bodybuilder.
He was. I think he was like 20. I think he had one loss, but he was very good. I think he was the champion of some part of Italy or something. I'm not sure.
So, you know, it's not too much of a stretch when you start looking at that.
That's true. Yeah.
But, I always enjoyed boxing. It was always one of my favorite sports. I would tell you right now, even to this day, the greatest heavyweight fight of all time was Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali the first time they fought. It was in Madison Square Garden. It was billed as the fight of the century. Frazier stopped Ali, stopped the odds, and Ali would later say that it was the closest he ever felt to being dead.
Wow.
You know.
What do you think of the state of boxing today?
I would like to see some of the theatrics and trash talk disappear. Right now, there's been a tendency to try to drive revenue because that's what, I guess that was the impact of professional wrestling on boxing and martial arts.
But Jeff, in fairness, wasn't Ali quite the trash talker?
Yes, he was. Absolutely, he was. But things, and not that I didn't mind a little, but sometimes now it almost seems like they go a little bit too personal, too far.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
There's a line, and Ali was on one side of it, and a lot of today's fighters are on the other side. And a lot of them don't need it. You look at, well, a good example now with topical is mixed martial artist there, Conor McGregor. He doesn't need to run his mouth the way he does. If anything, if he ran it a little less, I think he might be more successful with attracting new fans and selling more T-shirts and that.
Hey, Jeff, though, I'm going to tell you what I find simply delightful. I find when one of these guys really, really goes over the line and they're talking about their mother and their sister and their wife, and they're really saying, and then they get their ass beat.
You know, the best one of those was a fighter named Renato Babalu Sorbo from
What's the name again?
Renato Babalu Sorbo.
I think I might have seen. Was that in recent years?
Yeah. I'm not sure if he's still fighting now or not, but he was in the UFC at the time of their big bubble, and he was the only guy to, my understanding, be told, you no longer have a job at the UFC because you're too violent. Now, too violent. Now, what had happened is he had held this opponent of his in an anaconda choke him out. Fight was over, and he held it for another 3 or 4 heartbeats.
Wow.
Which you're not supposed to do. When he was asked why, he said the man insulted my mother, and I had to teach him to respect my mother.
I remember that.
That
wasn't long ago, right?
No, not long.
Yeah.
I think that's a acceptable answer.
I agree.
But and I had the privilege there for a couple of weeks at basically we'll call it fantasy camp to wrestle with Bob a little bit.
Really?
Not at any kind of competitive level, you know.
I was going to say, how'd that turn out?
Well, this is like going to fantasy camp, and yeah, he's up here at his level, and I'm cruising along here. So it was, but I was in great shape at the time, so he could tie me up and knock me around all day if he wanted to.
You know, I've got parallel stories. I've trained with a lot of pros because I seek them out and I do interviews with them. And the hardest session where a guy didn't hold back on me was my good friend to this day, Mike Katz. This is when I was a kid. and I swear he was trying to kill me, and he's the nicest guy, but be careful what you ask for,
Yeah.
Let me ask you, since we're talking about boxing and training and preparing for the pugilist, since you're not a boxer per se, you're a student, but what did you have to learn, or did you have to train differently, or, the choreography, all that? Did you have to really immerse yourself in all that?
A lot of it. I had also boxed a little bit off on or trained as a boxer. I never competed. Off and on different places, in Ottawa, and Halifax, and Arson Round the Y there years ago. And then when I started to get the idea of possibly competing, was when I used to get these cluster headaches. So that becomes a little more cautious at that point. And I think this helped me to learn a little bit more about some of the areas I went at the pugilist, such as what would happen if this was something bad. And now it wasn't. Eventually my issues passed, but that's when I became aware of things like severe concussions and CTE. And I'd had my fair share of concussions over the years. I played rugby, I cheat wrestled a little, I did some Muay Thai. I was never the best guy in the room, but what I tell people is I used to lead with my face.
You never want to be the best guy in the room. You're not going to rise that way, man.
Absolutely. And if
you want to be around, metaphorically at least, you want to be around all the guys who are going to kick your ass somehow.
You start thinking you're the best guy in the room, it's time to find a new place to train.
A new room, that's right. Yeah. Before we go, I want to talk about some of the messages you deliver in the pugilist, but beforehand, talking about Stallone, and I'm a student of Stallone, and very interesting. It's funny how a lot of comedians years ago used to make fun of him and he's stupid, this and that. I think you and I know he's a genius.
Oh, he's incredibly intelligent.
The highest proclivity for creativity, and he knows how to deliver the message. But even still, I mean, I guess he suffered some severe injuries. He got hit so hard by Dolph Lundgren, he had to take 5 days off, have surgery on a bone in his chest. And then there's all this. But I guess you suffered a broken nose.
Yeah, and I think I sent you the behind the scenes footage of that. And so we had the ring, and we had this facility for 4 days to shoot this sequence. So even with a broken nose, we had to finish all the stuff that was done with the fight sequences were done then. So that made that a challenge.
Let me stop, because I don't know the technical end. Are you guys really hitting each other, or sometimes, or how does that work?
We were really hitting each other. The camera angles aren't great for it because we had lost our original facility at the last minute, had to reshoot. This new place was so small, the ring was the size of the room.
Oh, wow.
That's why it was so dark when how we shot it.
Yeah, I noticed that.
From Rocky. In the first Rocky movie, they turned all the lights off to hide the fact that there's no one in the stands.
I read, in Derek Johnson's documentary, someone was saying that they didn't have the money to hire enough people for the crowd, so they did some tricks with the camera. Is that correct?
We used the same trick because our original plan was to have our main principal camera, but then we were going to have 3 secondary cameras with guys dressed up with Sports Network golf shirts and jackets, holding the cameras with the logos of the Sports Network, so that it would blend in like if you're watching HBO boxing, which would have made some interesting cuts. But we no longer had the room to accommodate everything, and we could bring our extras in at that point. So,
Jeff, when that happens, when you're hit with that in midstream, you can't use this place. Does that deflate you, or you're just kind of staying on your feet and running forward anyhow?
Well, it worries me, but you can't stop and stand still long enough to think about it. So the first thing you got to do is start hunting for a new location where this would fit. And what had happened was our makeup artist, actually, a young lady named Katie Orm, she knew some people that had just purchased an abandoned school that was empty. It was bad state of repair. Their plan was to flip it and build, I believe, office buildings. But there was no heat in there. There was no light. There were no washrooms. And we had a cold snap in November where it was actually about 30 below Celsius the day we shot that. It was colder in the building than out. So it was, we wound up shooting those conditions. So I never stopped long enough to think about it until after it was shot and realized how fortunate we were to get this position, because they hadn't started to flip it yet. They let us come in and film there, which was very nice of them. But as we're filming that, and I think this has a little bit to do with what happened with my nose. Nigel Flood's named the actor who played the young boxer. It was his first movie as well. And Nigel, his history is in boxing and Muay Thai. And he's very good at both, and he's very fast. I've never sparred with anyone half as fast as him. And all of our choreographed plans are out the window now because we're in a new location and camera's a new angle. So I'm thinking as a director, as I'm trying to lead him around, not paying enough attention to him. Because my instruction to him were, oh yeah, hey, go right ahead. I'll get out of the way. Sure. His last words. So as we're going, I do a couple of really dumb things in which I circle left a few times, which you never do. And but it's because I'm trying to get to where I want the camera shot for the cuts. Well, at one point, I put my hands down, and as you know, having seen the movie, is Seamus, which is my character, wasn't supposed to be all that good anymore. He's supposed to appear to be a guy that used to be good.
He's 42 years old in the movie, right?
Yes. And old for a boxer, and he's a guy who's been on severe decline, and his coaches and such have been ne'er-do-wells over the years. And I'm not giving anything away to those listening when I say this, because in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we discovered he has CTE and he's been told to stop fighting. But it wouldn't be much of a fight movie if he did. So we tried to build towards a reason as to why he would still do that. So as Nigel and I are filming this scene, I drop my hands and I go flat foot. And I do that a lot. I look like I'm not quite where I should be. And I step right into his right cross. And it sounded just like somebody had cracked a 2x4 over the knee. So I know it's broken before I even see the blood hitting the mat. And it wasn't the first time. This was the 14th time that the damn thing went on me. So the first night is I yelled up to my director of photography, Yannis, not to cut his camera. And we have a guy there who's patched up my nose, who by trade was a nurse. And he was on the movie playing the cornerman for the opposing fighter. So I tell him to skirt him over the corner, we put him on the stool, and we get the guy with playing my cornerman, who's an accomplished mixed martial artist with kickboxing and is being made for pay. So they've all seen a fair share of it. We're in a room full of people that have been around broken noses enough where no one's in a panic.
Let me ask you, when that happened and you knew it was broken, being the artist that you are, did you think, hey, this is actually good?
Oh yeah, I couldn't have been happier. The corner.
That's the only time you could be happy, breaking your nose.
Yeah. So we got some good footage that ended up in the movie because of that. That was all B-roll because we came down with the camera real close, and we had me on the stool, the nose broken, a proper quarterman now holding my nose there.
But Jeff, since you're not real opponents and you're actors, did your adversary feel bad?
He felt worse than anyone. As a matter of fact, we had to cut the scene quicker because you could see the look on his face where he felt bad. He was staying in character. We would have left that roll another 2 minutes.
Jeff, you said he was lightning quick. What was your style? What was your fighting style? Like, you got Rocky. He's like kind of a body shot, powerful guy. I mean, what was your style?
Well, for the character that we were trying to do, which was a little bit similar to me, was he really only had one good weapon, which was an overhand right. That was supposed to be his knockout power punch. He was supposed to be one of those guys, real knockout, one-hit power. Not technically proficient, not the fastest guy, so he over-relied on that, but he had this ability to take a beating, which is where the CTE is what it took him. Whereas the style for the other fighter was supposed to be someone more Olympic style. If you watch the early Evander Holyfield fights when he was in the Olympics, for example, he's bobbing, he's weaving, he's fast, he's leveling his feet. So this guy, his character was supposed to be the next big thing in boxing, the way up the way Holyfield would have been seen at that point in his career. And Seamus is one of these guys that, yeah, he can still knock you out, but he's going to get hurt doing it. So that was sort of where we were trying to build a little bit of the way in which the audience can identify with Seamus, because nobody wants to see their best days go. And one thing that I said in the first interview I ever did about the movie, which was the CBC, right out the gate when I was asked about that, I said I wanted to be clear about one thing. This is not a Rocky movie. Somebody's already made that. There's no way I can do the same thing as well. And no one would ever forgive me if I did. I just want to make sure the expectations were understood that we weren't trying to be Rocky, we were trying to be us.
You know, there's an axiom in the marketing world, and it goes like this. First in the marketplace is always first in the minds of the consumers. So if you try to mimic it, but let me ask you a question. You mentioned in something I read or I may have watched, because I watched a lot of your stuff and read your stuff today. Your one of your messages is this man has lost his identity.
Yes, which is meant to be in two ways with the character. One is that he lost it because when you have CTE, that's a very real thing. You don't know who you are half the time. You're confused. All your thoughts like you're trying to push them through cheesecloth. But also, he's told he can't do the only thing he's ever done. He's told, you can't box anymore. All this man's ever done is box. He was his backstory was, and it's hinted at in the movie. He was a homeless guy that a fellow that owned a gym brought in when he found out he could box. They'd start to make money off him. So he doesn't know what he'll do now. Meanwhile, his wife, university professor, receives tenure, and she's on the way up. And a little Easter egg in for the people that have studied John Locke is that's this character's very specialty is his wife. And so John Locke had done some work where he proposed that identity and psychology were basically rooted in the same themes inside of our mind. They come from the same place, and up until that point, a lot of academics, doctors didn't believe that. So he was the first one to say these things are very much connected, and a lot of what we know about modern identity crisis comes from these types of concepts. So she's studying these things while he's very honestly having to face the reality. I can't fight anymore. I don't know how to do anything else.
Well, I remember the bar scene, he asked, what is tenure? And I was trying to tell him, hey, your wife is going to have guaranteed income forever.
Yeah.
You know, something you made me think about, you know, losing your identity versus reinventing yourself. I've had to kind of do that a couple of times in my life. But you look at the Rocky series, and it made me think just now that, in a way, you know, he opened a restaurant, he's successful, but he always comes back to boxing. That's the theme all the time. I mean, it wouldn't be Rocky if he didn't. But what do you think of that? Has he really reinvented himself? Maybe not.
My favorite line, all six of the Rocky movies, is there's still something in the basement.
Yeah.
There's still something. And that resonates with me. And I think in the case of the Rocky character, boxing wasn't what he did, it was who he was. And there's always going to be that thing in the basement that makes him want to go farther, want to do more, and want to challenge it. And it doesn't matter how many other avenues Rocky pursues, I think it's always got to come back to that for him. And that would be the one similarity I think that the Sheamus character would have with the Rocky character. And I think it's something that a lot of fighters share. I don't think it's unique to to few fighters. I think most boxers, most martial artists, it's who they are. It just becomes part of them. And it's not something that's easy to walk away from.
But Jeff, a couple of things here. I remember I was maybe 30 years old at the time, and George Foreman made a comeback, and he was in his 40s.
Yes.
And knocked out Michael Moorer. And people were over the fact that he was in his 40s and he did this. And then, you know, guys, well, you're younger than me, but I'm 57. I'm ordinarily in decent shape, and I'll get that stuff. Well, oh, you look good for your age. You know, that's fine. But there's this kind of undercurrent from people when you're getting on in years, you're not supposed to do these things. Now, your character, aside from having TTE, you know, maybe that's enough to say, let's not do this anymore. But many times there's guys with the same physicality and age, but not encumbered by a brain injury, and still they're told not to do this. And I don't agree with that. You know, the age is a barrier.
And I'm inclined to agree with the lines of what you're thinking. And again, if you look at Rocky VI, this is the crux of his argument when he argues to get his license to fight again.
Oh, Rocky Balboa, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm inclined to agree with you. If you're healthy enough to do it, then that should be your choice. And for some people, even knowing it's a bigger risk as you get older, things are a bigger risk. It's more important to them to take that risk than to wither to nothing. Old soldiers never die; they only fade away. Um, that's nice to say, and I don't think really means what most people think it means, though. Nobody really wants to just fade away. They want to rage against the night. And
I want you to go back to the pugilist in a second and go through the story a little more. But we could talk about Ronnie Coleman. You know, Ronnie Coleman, 8 times Mr. Olympia.
yes.
And Ronnie Coleman now suffers from something that we in medicine will describe as chronic pain. And chronic pain can be so so pervasive that it can literally change your personality. Now, young guys look at Ronnie Coleman and they say the soldier, and I would do the same thing. And Ronnie himself even says, you know, the only thing he is melancholic about as far as squatting 800 pounds twice is he wish he could have done it 5 times. And maybe he believes that, but I love Ronnie and all respect, but he's destroyed now. He's got fused vertebrae, hip replacement, knee replacement, shoulder replacement. He uses a walker. I think people of that as far as what you do to yourself in the future. But you've got your character with the CTE, and he's coming back anyhow. So, develop that a little for us.
Well, and I think this might apply to Ronnie in real life as well. Sometimes it really just is who you are. There's a line in the movie which Seamus says, "I don't know how to be nothing else." And the whole point of that is he would rather go in the ring and die in the ring than not be able to climb back in the ring. It's just intrinsic to his character. Whereas I'll say, I suspect you're probably not too far off the mark on this one. We look at the longevity of training and how to go longer and preserve it, and we'd rather make adjustments and do that. Whereas somebody like Seamus or Ronnie, they just want to go that one speed, balls to the walls, and see where they get. And when they can't go anymore, something inside of them, I think, might die. It's like a shark; it's going to swim or it'll sink. And that's where I tried to go with this character. There's a really interesting scene in there. And originally there was dialogue around this scene. In the editing room, I cut all the scenes with the dialogue out. And what happens is the fighter goes to the park and he sits on this bench. And time goes by, and that's in the morning. The afternoon, he's still sitting on this bench. Nighttime comes and still sitting on this bench. His wife walks in and gets him and walks away. In the original edit, they had a conversation on the bench in which he explained why he's got to sit there and how he's lost, and it was meant to be the big metaphor. But we had a brilliant score written by a fella named Scott Brown. He wrote and recorded this original score, and I thought his music did enough where we didn't need that dialogue to make that same point. And at that point, if we've done our job with the movie, you realize that if Seamus doesn't fight, he's just going to be this guy sitting on the bench staring out the ocean for the rest of his life.
I hope I'm not going out on a limb, but is there a parallel? Is there any parallel with that, with you coming back from that deep dark hole and sitting on the bench looking at the lake?
Absolutely. There's a lot of me and Seamus, I think. And I think there's a lot of Seamus in most athletes, but there's a lot of me that I put right into him. If I hadn't been able to get off the couch and start having that coffee and eventually segue back into the gym, there's no doubt that I wouldn't be here today. I would have withered away. And there's no doubt that if Seamus didn't have something to train for, he would have withered away. And when we get to the point in the movie where he decides he wants to train again, but he's never going to fight, in the audience you're thinking, no, of course I'll fight. It's a fight movie. You know this going in. So we're trying to tell a story in which we can keep you on the audience's side when he makes a decision, which is why some of the other characters are a little bit near-do-well and a little bit manipulative with him. Interesting little story.
Yeah, before you keep that in mind, that story, I just want to ask one question relevant to what we were just saying. This involves both you and Seamus. If you were posed this question, which was actually posed, it might have been the professor who did big studies on steroids, Charles Yeselis, might have been him, but it doesn't matter. But the question was posed to a number of top Olympic athletes, And the question was this: if you knew you could take a pill and win, an Olympic World Championship, but you die within a year, I don't remember the number, but most of them said, "Yeah, I'd take that pill." Are you guys in that at that point, that state of mind? Would you have taken that pill?
I actually tried to go the other. I don't know if it came across. I tried to go the other way with the character because, with me, I would rather turn down the pill, still train, even if I don't get there and die in that same year, than to get it and win and die in that year. To me, the obstacle has to be chased, and whether or not I took the pill and went to the Olympics and got a medal, or I didn't take the pill, it wouldn't stop the fact that there's a chase.
Right.
So, to me, getting the medal but ending the chase is losing. Whereas continuing the chase onward, that's a win. You want to know the secret to life? You watch a dog chase his tail.
Dogs again, yeah.
But nothing's ever happier than a dog when he's chasing his tail. When he catches it, it's sad for a minute, lets it go, starts all over.
Yeah, I really wish things were that simple and that's all I had to do each day.
One of my secrets for my mental health over the last few years is no matter what's going on, rain, shine, snow, the dog and I read it out at least 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes we'll go out for as long as 2-3 hours. And we'll just put everything behind. I don't take the phone. I leave it there, and I watch him run around. That's what I'll do.
Jeff, would you say that, and I know I'm kind of like this, you pursue things that are extremely difficult and when there's much easier paths that you could take?
Absolutely. But
why do you do that? I want to know. I really want to know because I want to know, like, I do that sometimes.
I can only speculate because I'm not sure if this is entirely why I do it or not, but I've thought about that. And I think it comes down to a question of never wanting to sit back when I'm old and gray in the nursing home and say, what if I had tried that? And why didn't I try that? I don't think I could live with those questions. Whereas
so really, you're building a life that will eliminate regret when you're ready to go, hopefully many years from now.
As best I can, yes. I'd rather live with failure than with regret.
Wow, I like that. I interrupted you a couple of times.
That's okay.
As I do, but we have to get to these nuggets. But go back. You were talking about the movie and progressing through that.
Oh, I was going to tell a story. I want to give a little bit of credit to a fellow named Jason Robertson who came on. He played the character of Doc in the movie. He took his part on 3 days' notice.
Wow.
We had another fellow attached to that part for about a year. And something happened and he had to leave 3 days before we started filming that character. So that fellow stepped in for the last minute, and I think he might have got one of the strongest performances in the movie. He's a Shakespearean trained theater actor, so
wow.
He came in so prepared, and even with just 3 days, and it was just, when you got to the editing room, you fell in love with that man because you could take any sequence he was in, and if the audio was bad, you could take the audio from another take, and you could take his best physical take, and they would line right up.
Wow.
His cadence, everything was identical. Our second bartender was the same way, with the clothes on his tattoo. But he wasn't in as many scenes, but he's the same way every beat. I've used him in a couple of things. So those are real nice things to run into when you're making a movie, because sometimes when the editing room and things don't quite line up, you want to cry because there could be a lot of work. Sometimes you'll spend hours on what becomes seconds on screen, and then seconds on what becomes minutes.
Is that kind of like writing a book and losing a chapter, like I did?
Yes. Yeah. So
you know, just quickly, I went downstairs and I told Denise, I said, I just, as you know, it's a ton of, I'm not complaining, a ton of work, but it's, you're digging deep and you're putting this stuff together. To this day, I don't know what happened. So she said, just write another one and make it even better. And I think I did, maybe in a different way. But did anything like that ever happen to you?
Well, when you do a movie, there's a good chance you always have reshoots, sometimes for different reasons. But yeah, we lost some footage. So
you did.
The sequence where the boxer's wife decides she leaves him because she can't watch him do this to himself. And at the gym, and they have that
Yes.
in the middle of the moment, right dead center of the movie. We lost all of that.
Wow.
We had to go back and reshoot it. And when we lost that, we also lost a little bit of the training footage. So we had to go back into the box club and shoot all that stuff again. I think it came out better because we did, because at this point we'd seen the dailies, we had an idea as to how they looked. So it gave you a chance almost as though you're proofreading your own footage that you don't always have because of time and money and all that. So it's frustrating at the time, but I think it worked out better in this case. It's not a habit I want to get into because I think more often than not you're going to be screwed. But well, this time. Something else that happened while we were filming this, which was very important. It was very good to us. But there were two things. There's a boxer in England named Peter Flanagan, and he had retired for this reason. And while we were in pre-production on the film, I had met through Facebook, I had met his daughter Tina. And some of the things that we did with our boxer here in the movie, I told us we're always planning. We had some discussions, and she told me what these scenarios were like when they did it for real, which led to some rewrites. So when you see the sequence where he's getting his diagnosis from the neuropathologist, originally the dialogue was such a way that the wife spoke, the husband spoke, the wife spoke, the husband spoke, the doctor would reply to both of them. Well, when the young lady playing the boxer's wife showed up that day to shoot that sequence, I said, I got good news for you. You've got more lines. You're saying all of mine. And when Peter and Tina went to do it, she took her father in when they were in this position. He didn't speak. He couldn't. It was too much of a shock. It was too much to overcome. It was bad news. So she was the one that had to be strong and ask the question. So well, that's what happened there. That's what we'll do in the movie. It makes sense. Another person I got to meet through this process was, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his last name a little bit. I actually have a bit of a speech impediment. Alan Weiweiss.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, he had a couple of professional fights years ago, and then went on to become a professional sparring partner. He had jobs in training camps with Larry Holmes and Lennox Lewis and Mike.
Wow.
Tyson. And he's retired now with CTE.
So he's gotten his bell rung.
Yes, he has. And last week he actually got 2 heart surgeries related to his CTE.
Oh, God.
Because they're trying to do things to prevent the possibility of too much blood coming up into his brain at one given time, causing problems that way. And very nice man. But he'll tell you, boxing saved his life. He grew up in a rough neighborhood in D.C., and to keep him out of trouble, his father put him into boxing. And it gave him all these great opportunities, but it left him with this condition. So he helped me a lot too with trying to figure out how would this character maybe navigate this scenario, that scenario, because we rely on some of his experiences. And when we had the finished product and he saw it, forgive me, Alan, if you don't want me to say this, but I told you I would. He teared up, and then he watched it again with his wife, and she teared up, and he told me that it was the first time that he knew of that anyone told this type of a story from the fighter's perspective. The big benchmark for this conversation and film right now is Concussion with Will Smith, which is a good movie.
Yeah, great.
It's coming from the doctor's perspective.
Would you say in doing that, I would say you're probably honoring a lot of these guys who aren't able to.
That's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to make the sport look bad or the athletes look bad.
Right.
What I want to do is say this is a real consequence. How can we protect our athletes and preserve our sport? What's our obligation to them? And there is one. Just how we address it now becomes the question.
Hey, I've got to ask you, I admire, listen, I got a chapter in my book, and it's called Nothing Sucks. If I don't do something, I cannot say that it sucks because I have not mastered it, and no matter what it is. I enjoy watching boxing, but yeah, also as a physician, I'm not going to say I have a problem with it, but the objective is to hit a person in the head hard enough to disconnect their physiologic function so they lose consciousness. I got a little conflict with that. And the damage that ensues from that has to be addressed, which is what you've done, right?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And I think particularly the promoters, the venues, and the fight fans all have to say, okay, this is happening largely because of us. How can we help these athletes when they're hurt? I think there's an obligation there. And I'm hoping this steers the conversation the right way. One of the real interesting things to come out of this, and the movie was always planned as a one-off, the feature length version of it. But now we're developing a sequel, which has happened because of feedback from fighters that have seen this.
You're working on that now?
Yeah. And,
well, fantastic.
I got a teaser trailer out. Sometime in the next year, we're going to start a campaign to start raising the funding to do it. We want to elevate the production values, try to get the next generation of values into the film. And but the trick is now to find a way to tell this man's life doesn't stop because boxing stops. This problem doesn't go away because boxing stops. So what happens to him now? So between different fighters that have seen it and asked that question, a couple of doctors, it became clear to me that there was an opportunity to tell a story. So we're developing that now, and we actually did a short, I'm going to say 40, 45-second teaser trailer to hint at the movie, and now that's in development. I'll send you a link to that.
Make sure you do, because I'll post it. I do want to ask you, if you look at the NFL, they put funds together and systems to address and help many of the players who suffer from CTE. I don't know if it's adequate. I know there's lawsuits. Does boxing have anything like that?
Not yet.
They don't.
No. But and one of the differences between the NFL and boxing is in the NFL they always try to pretend it didn't exist. In boxing, it was always called giving your bell rung, being punched drunk. So there was never a denial that this risk was there. The scope of it at one point was unknown, and even now isn't as understood as well as it should. The question now becomes, at what point did they realize they had an obligation, and how do you move forward from there? I think the best thing to do would be to be proactive about it. If you're going to be a fight promoter, you're going to promote a big fight, you're going to have something at the MGM Grand, well, you're going to make a big purse. Put a percentage of money away from each purse to go into fund for when these things happen for the fighters.
What do you think? You mentioned UFC earlier. What do you think of a promoter like Dana White? You think he does things right?
My impression, I don't know Dana White. I wouldn't want to misrepresent that, but my impression.
I'd like to get him on here.
Oh, if you can get him on, I think you'd have a huge turn for that.
You see, I believe I can get anybody on here. I got you.
Listen, I wouldn't go on just anyone's podcast, but you and Rogan, that's it. But I think if you were able to get Dana White on, it might be hard to sometimes pin him to things. He seems like he can be as slippery as a catfish when he wants to be. I think his genius comes from marketing.
Oh yeah, it's all marketing
to build things up. I think in that regard, he's a classic promoter.
No, but what I meant was, you may not know this, but has he addressed, maybe there's not so much CTE, but injuries in that league?
Not to my knowledge. I think they're a little stricter now about when they clear somebody for medical. But that seems more reactive than proactive to me.
Well, I'm only saying, I don't know the mechanics that well, but you got guys getting hit in the head with a bony fist, not buffered by a glove. I mean, you might as well be getting hit with a rock sometimes. There's got to be some type of residual, dysfunction.
Right along those lines, there's been debates now for years about whether or not the headgear is actually helping or hurting, because the idea is that the concussive force might be bouncing through the headgear back to your head again.
Well, that's interesting. Wow.
I don't know the answer, but I know that's something that's being looked at.
Yeah. I just wanted your take because you're in this. You're telling stories about these types of athletic endeavors, fights, sports. But you're involved. You're involved in some film festivals. You've won some awards.
Yes,
We
yeah.
got to cast the plaudits for you when we can.
Well, the one I'm most proud of was the one I won for In the Bleach. That was just it was an Best Actor award. It was something that I was passionate about, and I was very happy to be part of it. And we shot that while The Pugilist was in post production. So we were doing some editing. So it gave me an opportunity to go work on another project. I wouldn't have been able to take on a feature. So this was just the right size and scope, and I was able to put a lot into it.
Jeff, how do film festivals work? I mean, how do you get your work in there to be even considered? It can't be easy.
Well, you've got to find a festival first that would be a fit for your project. For example, if you do a Terms of Endearment style movie and you send it to a horror film festival, you're going to get rejected. So it's all about just thinking that third. And any given year, the number of submissions could be different. The higher end of the festival it is, the higher your production values must be. If you were going to submit something to Sundance, for example, feature-length submissions to Sundance, your movie could not have played anywhere ever ahead of Sundance.
Explain Sundance a little.
So Sundance is probably the gold standard in North America for film festivals. The big ones would be Sundance and Banff, and in Europe the big one would be the Cannes Festival.
Yeah, and what's the one they hold in Colorado, I think?
I'm not sure. I think Sundance is in Utah.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Okay, it doesn't matter.
It was begun by Robert Redford.
Oh, and, right. Okay.
So
what do you do? What do you do? You submit your work? Is that how it works?
Yeah, you submit your work in, and it'll be screened by a panel. And what they'll look at a few things. They'll look at, first of all, whether or not they've shown anything like it already on the catalog, maybe the previous year, or if there's 6 coming in this year that all have the same theme, they're only going to take one. They'll look at the production level. They'll look at, in some cases, how much money went into it. It depends on the festival. Hiring ones like Sundance, if you're not prepared to put, I shouldn't say prepared, if you're not able to put maybe $5 million into a movie, you're probably not going to get in Sundance.
Wow. Okay.
And a lot of these festivals, a lot of times filmmakers are looking to get that break to where they can become that level of filmmaker. So you look at those thresholds. You've got to be careful. There's a lot of festivals now because of the age of the internet submission that actually don't exist.
Really?
Yeah. So just because you see something online doesn't mean it's real. There are organizations like filmfreeway.com that you can go through that certify these real festivals. So if they're not listed with somebody like them, I personally avoid it because I just don't know. Unless it's something so well known that there's no denying it. Sundance is real. But you can look through here and they can tailor your search engines to find short film or horror festivals or action festivals. So that helps a lot. But on any given year, you could be dealing with a competition load of 100 movies or 10,000 movies depending on the festival. So it's not always easy to get into them.
In your industry, to navigate successfully, do you have to keep your guard up? Like, who do you trust or who do you not trust?
You do. That's one reason why I like going through these intermediaries for the festivals, because they can house your screener copies. So they are taking on some of that liability. If somebody is to violate that trust, there's a chain in which you can follow to get accountability help. But also, you never know who might see a script or something and try to walk off with it, or who might try to pirate things. Piracy is it's not something I would worry about where I am right now. But if I was to say shoot something tomorrow and I had Sylvester Stallone's name on it, I would be very worried about it. Because if for the most part someone's going to pirate your movie, they've got to know that there's a way for them to make money off the pirated copy. Most people aren't going to know, oh, it's a Jeff Kelley movie, but this movie's got Sylvester Stallone. Well, they know who he is. So those are concerns that as I grow will become more and more important too. Right now, the big thing though is I've been pretty lucky at being able to understand who I can and cannot trust just by talking. I've had good instincts that way. They've served me well, so I rely on them. But as far as going to a festival, if you're not listed with a third party that certifies who you are, I'm probably not going to take that chance.
Well, Jeff, we're live and I don't edit anything, so I don't I don't pull any of that malarkey. I hate it.
Oh, no. So, I think that's sort of important stuff as well, to understand where all that sits. So, yeah, you got to be careful, but at the same time, if you're going to be so careful everything's boxed in all the time, no one's going to see your work. If no one's going to see it, why did you do it?
Right, might hold you back. How's training now for you? What are you doing for training? Staying in shape?
Well, it was a rough year for training. There was some family issues where we had some tragedies, so other things became a priority. So I'm not quite at tip-top or fighting shape at the moment, but I've been doing some calisthenics. I've got a heavy bag out in the garage I've been working on to try to keep fit, and I get a good hiking with the dog every day.
Any Masters bodybuilding contests on the horizon for you?
Well, once January 1st hits, I'm going to start reinventing my physique again to look at possibly competing in October. So I'm going to give myself all kinds of time so I could do things properly. And we're going to look at filming that journey for a follow-up documentary to the one that you watched today.
That's cool. And for anybody watching, even if you watch this later on MTFU, you can find the documentary that Jeff made on his bodybuilding journey. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. Surprised me that wasn't your first show though, right?
No, that was after a 10-year absence.
Okay, right.
But I had come down from 265 to one. I think my official weigh-in, if I remember correctly, we filmed it, so it's easy to fact check, was 185.5, I think.
You were 265 at one point.
Yeah. And,
how tall are you? What's your height?
6 feet and half an inch.
Was that intentional? Did you try to bulk up like that?
That all was part of the fallout from rock bottom.
Yeah, I've been there. Not quite that heavy, but I'm the same height as you. And yeah, I've been up to, I think 251 when I came home from. Father came to pick me up at the hospital. He didn't recognize me. Just, and I didn't have to gain that much weight. I can't just say I was sick, Part of it was on me.
When you get that heavy too, I found it makes it harder to motivate yourself to do any small thing.
Oh,
you're exhausted all the time. And I imagine it'd be the same if you had too much muscle for your friend as well. Weight is weight. At some point, it's going to be bad. But when we were filming that, by the time I went on stage, I was down to 177 at the weigh-in. I kept losing. I lost a lot of water that night overnight, and I was all along. My goal was to get to 176, so I didn't quite make it. I wanted to go into the biggest middleweight, and instead I went into the smallest light heavy.
Oh.
And, so there was a big obstacle there. But something that's not covered in the documentary, didn't quite make it the editing process, and I sort of thought it should have, and I did this with Ian Esty. He wanted to be more polite to some areas of the sport than I did. And I needed that distance because obviously if you're the subject of it, you need someone else there to keep things objective.
I won't ask about a 5-year plan because I hate that nonsense. When I opened one of my first businesses, a friend of mine who was in business for a long time, he said to me, he goes, this takes 5 years. And I thought in my head, I'm like, if I believe that, I won't start having success for 5 years. So mathematically, that might be true statistically, but the thinking, you can't allow that. But that being said, for you, going forward, where are you going with all this? What are the hopes as far as, what things will evolve into with the filming and the training and everything in the movies?
Well, I had been planning on filming a movie this spring, but with all the restrictions around the virus paranoia, that one now on hold until I don't know when. It was called Goodman and Goodman, and it's about 2 brothers who are hitmen. And it starts off sort of like almost a dark action comedy, and at about the midpoint, something bad happens to their family, and it becomes a full-on John Wick style movie. So it was going to be a very big departure from the pugilist. I have one in development that I call the farmhouse, which is about a soldier with PTSD and his wife, who's an accountant, and they moved to a farmhouse so he could be out of the city, away from the street noise, and there's a paranormal element to it. So again, something a little different. I like the idea of always doing something a little different. And that, along with the pugilist, is where the development is on those. At the same time, I'm currently novelizing the pugilist, and I got something about a soldier I'm trying to develop as well. Which
find something unique and special, and then your path is directed by you. Well, what I mean is, do you see yourself in Hollywood directing and making pictures eventually, or?
I don't want to make the big budget Hollywood films. Maybe 15 years ago I would have had the energy for that, but if I can do something with this where I can earn a comfortable living and tell stories I think people will enjoy, and in some cases maybe even learn or grow from, but keep my independence away from the larger outlets, I think I'd rather do that. I think there's something to be said for being able to stay in control of your destiny and be a little bit true to your own agenda than to hand it all over. To give you an example of that, if you look at someone like, say, Quentin Tarantino. Now, Tarantino has a lot of control over everything he does. If I could do something like that, but on a slightly smaller scale, because I like to still be able to go to the grocery store and not be recognized or mobbed, then I think I'd rather do that than get to the big studio systems. But I think that's a preference too. I know other filmmakers that would love to start making the large movies like you see at the IMAXs, the Zack Ryder stuff, and I enjoy seeing them. But if you were to say to me, let's go see a movie. We can go see the latest big X-Men on the screen. We can go watch Casablanca. I'm going to choose Casablanca every time.
I think you're on your way, from what I hear, and I hope you continue. And Jeff, tell the people, how can they find some of your work, to watch your work and enjoy your work?
Well, some of it is, the other stuff is up on YouTube, so some of it can be searched.
Can you give me some addresses? I'll type them in right now.
Well, I can tell you what I can do is if anyone was to go to Facebook.com/Experiment5Media, that is the production banner I work under. So links, posters, and all that I can send out to anyone that wants to reach out that way. Rebuild we have up on the MTFU Society page, but that's also on YouTube. Everything doing festivals right now. The Pugilist has its own Facebook page, and when the festival dates wind up for that, we're going to be looking at a larger sorts of distribution. So following along.
I'm sorry, the Pugilist. Where can that be found?
Facebook.com/The Pugilist of the Movie. Capital letter and first letter of each word.
Okay.
And following along with that, we'll show just really wind up with things like status of the sequel that's in development, and when we get to distribution with the current movie and how people can find it, we'll be up there at that point. So something else too that's sort of neat is if someone's interested in a little 8-minute horror movie that kind of feels like a Hammer film, we shot it in one night in a graveyard. It's called Dirt Road Dead, and it's on YouTube.
Hey, what is it again?
Dirt Road Dead.
Dirt Road Dead.
It's up on YouTube. And there's another one called Frozen Trade, which was a spy thriller set in 1971 Moscow.
Well, that's cool stuff, man. And I've been really happy to have you on here. And you do a lot of cool stuff.
Well,
and you know, this is not a cut in any measure, but you're just a guy who decided to do this stuff. You're not connected.
No, I'm just some guy with a dog.
You don't have millions of dollars, I'm assuming. You know, you've had difficulties in life. You chose bodybuilding, so you know, your back's gonna be up against it anyhow sometimes.
Always choose the hard way.
You know, Les Brown, one of my favorite motivational speakers, he says, if you do it as easy, your life will be hard. But if you do it as hard, your life will be easy. And his voice is much more flowing than mine. When he says it, it delivers.
There's some wisdom in that.
There really is.
Yeah.
I just put up a meme, as pathetic as it sounds, and it says it's something about these gurus telling you how to make money, and then the next page says do the work. Right? Yeah. There's no getting away from it.
No.
Would you agree that you work really hard and you put this stuff together, but it would be cool to have some luck fall upon you? I mean, that's okay, right?
Absolutely. Somebody asked me not too long back.
But you don't expect it.
No, you can't. But somebody asked me not too long back with the pugils, how did you get the large brands like Everlast to come and help you out? Because these are companies that sometimes turn down Hollywood projects. And
yeah.
I said, I called and I asked, what do you mean? I said, anyone that got on board that helped out with that, I called and I asked. You call the switchboard, you find a gatekeeper, you call that gatekeeper, you call the next guy. And if you call 200 places, 195 of them are going to say no. But the other ones, they like what you're doing, they find a way to help you out as best they can. And sometimes it's a very simple thing. It's not a monetary thing, but we shot some sequences at a place called the Shadowlawn Inn. What we were talking about earlier, where Seamus asks the bartender, what's Tinder mean? Well, that was shot in the reception area at the Shadowlawn Inn. And they booked that out for weddings and things like that. But they gave us the use of the space just because they liked what we were doing, and in exchange for just giving the name and the credits. And a lot of things like that go a long way towards getting these things done.
Sure.
But you've got to be willing to ask people for help, and if they say no, you can't hold that against them. They don't owe you anything. But if someone does something like this for you, of course, you want to show your appreciation and you want to be good to them. So if you're not willing to do all those cold calls, to do all that letter writing, you're not going to get any success. The Pugils is a $250,000 budget, which is nothing for a movie. Mainstream movies are millions of dollars before they even get considered a low budget. And it was all bootstrapped. There were a lot of people, when I was first starting this, that said, you've got no money, you'll never be able to make that. And I said, well, I think I can. So
hey, listen, going from zero to 250 grand. Listen, the hardest thing to do is get people to open their wallet. Mm-hmm. And I've had to self-finance almost everything I've done. I've been somewhat fortunate. But there was a show I was running, and I approached very, very big supplement companies. I was much younger and naive. I was in my 30s. And I couldn't believe I was giving scholarships to collegiate bodybuilders. And it cost me 80 grand of my own money. I'm like, wait a minute, let me get some of these big companies. And then I realized because it wasn't profitable, they didn't want anything to do with it. Even though they put on a face where we're trying to help, nobody's really trying to help. So that means you got to help yourself.
Yeah.
I know that sounds cynical, but that's the reality of it.
Well, if you're not willing to approach it from that point of view, you're not going to do anything to spin your wheels. You've got to approach it from that point of view. And then as you go, if somebody says, hey, I am going to help you, great, you walk in with open arms. But you've got to get started first. And the only way to get started is to get off your ass and do the thing.
Jeff, I admire you, and I look at you as a guy who crushes it. And I know you're not where you want to be. I'm not where I want to be. And guess what? When you get there, you're going to want to be beyond that. So yeah. I salute you, man. We went a little overtime. Sorry if I took a lot of your time on a Friday night.
I'm glad to be here. I enjoyed this quite a bit.
Well, listen, we'll have you back on. The great thing about my life is I can do whatever I want. I can have you on every night. We have another project, something coming up. We'll put it on here. And I put all your info, like 4 or 5 different posts in the chat column. People can get a hold of you and come by and check out your stuff. And you can, of course, take this and disseminate it on your own. But I want to thank you, man. And I think, we had a few people, Friday, this wasn't scheduled and people are out. They'll visit this afterward. And I appreciate it once again, man, and best of luck to you.
Well, thank you, Mike. And again, I'm happy to have been on. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to sit down and talk to you. Actually, speak with our voices as opposed to our keyboards.
It's not always just pixels.
Yeah.
It's good to meet humans sometimes. Oh. When I had my practice, I used to see 100 people a day. And now I work from a home office, and I have another location, but I don't see many people. And never mind the COVID, regardless of it, it's different now. And I don't know if it's different. That's all I'll say, you know?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And, you know, I understand what you're saying. When I'm not filming something, even without COVID, I didn't see too many people if I wasn't filming. If you're not doing all that, most of the time, when you're doing the grunt work, there's never anyone around.
Oh, no.
It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you're training for a bodybuilding show, you're in the gym at 5:30 in the morning, who do you see? The guy that unlocked the door.
You're on your own, man. You're on your own. Ultimately, you know, it's all you. I have not found a person who could become transparent, go in my body, and do the work or do the jumping jacks, man. Like you were sitting on the bench, and you had to get up and drink that coffee and go, because I've been there, similar, not comparing, but ultimately nobody cares. You got to somehow light a fire on your ass and just do it.
I think it was Hemingway that said the hardest part is doing the thing.
Oh yeah, do the work. Do the work, and don't worry about the outcome, because what do they say? 80% of the people are glad, don't care about your problems. The other 20% are glad you have them. So
yeah, it's sort of like the idea of a guy that goes to the bar to complain to the bartender. The bartender will never care about your complaints, and when the tip starts coming, the bartender stops listening. You know?
Again, getting people to open that wallet.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for doing great work. I'm inspired by you. I like watching your stuff, and I think you're going to keep rising. I know you will, because as long as you keep going, you're only going to get better.
Well, thank you.
The key is to stay alive as long as you can.
Yeah. You can't do much after that.
Hey, Jeff, I want to thank you again, man, and God bless you. And again, you're doing great work. Just keep going, and I'll shoot you a message, and we'll talk, and we'll get back on, man.
Oh, I look forward to it. I enjoy that very much.
All right, my friend. And hey, listen, I dig Canada. If I ever leave the U.S., I go to Canada. But, you know, I'm not leaving. So
If you make it up here, I'm not hard to find. You know, we'll take the dog out.
very, very good. All right, Jeff, you have a great weekend, man.
Hey, thanks, Mike. You too.
I'll be back next week. We're going to have a couple of unnamed, really high-level people. I got to get them to commit, and I will, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you have a great night.